Welcome to the France 24 debate. I'm Mark Owen. Our focus in this edition is Europe. Ursula von der Leyen gave a speech earlier, a kind of State of the Union style address, an update on the state of play across the 27-state bloc. How is Europe, though, tackling the big issues? For instance, vaccination against COVID, running at over 70%. A success story by anybody's standards, but when you examine the detail, and as they say, the devil is in the detail, you see there is actually a big variation between the European states. So just one of the issues our panel will be dissecting in this debate. Let's introduce you to those people here to talk through taking Europe to the next level, as Ursula von der Leyen put it. Here in the studio, Yves Berencini, a consultant in European affairs and president of the Mouvement Européen here in France. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Always a pleasure to see you. Joining us from afar, Strasbourg, Asita Kanko, MEP of the European Conservatives and Reformists. Asita, great to see you. Thank you very much for being with us here on France 24. We always appreciate your time. And Michael Bloss, MEP for the Green Party as well, joining us from a different position there in Strasbourg and obviously ready to give us his point of view. Michael, thanks very much for being with us. Great to see you. Before I let the guests loose, let's take a listen to Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, speaking a little earlier.
Our first and most urgent priority is to speed up global vaccination. Team Europe is investing €1 billion to ramp up mRNA production capacity with Africa. We have already committed to share 250 million doses of vaccine. I can announce today that the Commission will add a new donation of another 200 million doses until the middle of next year. This is an investment in solidarity, and it is an investment also in global health.
So a definite signal there from Ursula von der Leyen that getting people vaccinated is very much key to taking Europe to the next level. Yves, can I start here with you in the studio? When you listened to what Ursula von der Leyen was saying, did you feel convinced? Did you feel that she's moving Europe in the right direction?
Well, on this precise point, absolutely yes. It has to be said. She said on vaccine, on the COVID-19 health emergency, it was not a sprint, but a marathon. So if you had asked me this question 10 months ago, the answer would have been different. But in this present situation, she's absolutely right to say that it's a success story. Because the track record of Europe in terms of number of people vaccinated, production of vaccine, export of vaccine, including to share at the global level, is impressive. Of course, it's not perfect. Within Europe, you have different countries where the vaccination rate is much lower, and this is not acceptable. And of course, internationally, this is the next level. So only on this, plus the economic answer to the crisis, with the ECB intervention, the new recovery plan, Next Generation EU. I think globally, yes, she is right to say that Europe has delivered. And of course, now it's time to go further. But to go further, it's important to underline when success are there, because it was not a given at the very beginning of the crisis.
Indeed, of course, little did we know what would happen, how it would develop and how it would all turn out. And clearly, we're not yet out of the crisis. It's still continuing. So, Yves, thank you for now. Let's bring in our MEPs, Asita Kanko first, if that's okay. Asita, great to see you. In terms of what Ursula von der Leyen was saying, where do you stand with that? Do you feel, are you in agreement?
Yes, thank you for having me, and hi to everyone else. I think she's showing leadership, so I very much support Ursula von der Leyen's way of working, because it's not easy to reach consensus inside the European Union, and I have 2 years experience to have noticed that. However, my only regret regarding the pandemic and the part of conversation about Africa is that it remains patronizing. I missed, I appreciate, of course, that we are going to put out vaccines, that we are advancing on that, but we did not speak of Africa as a partner. And I regret that, and I've always regretted that when the EU speaks about Africa, they forget that there is that dimension that should be developed, because strategically, China is just taking everything over there, and we are not having an EU-Africa strategy that can grant us a proper relationship that is preserving the dignity of people there and taking into account that they should be leaders themselves as well. And I've experienced that as a kid too, and still continuing. So this part should be developed in the way in which we're looking at Africa.
So you'd lobby to change the way the EU deals with Africa, even on the issue of vaccines and providing vaccines. What would that be by a sort of technology exchange, taking the actual production of the vaccines to Africa, taking sort of EU technology there? Would you say that, Asita?
I think it's partly that. It should be a combination of to have a holistic view on this. I was speaking to Commissioner Ursula Leyen yesterday, and she also has a very progressive view on that. Not only giving vaccines, but also contributing to resolve the reason why Africa wasn't able to have their own vaccines. And indeed, like you said, taking production, part of production, but also, thinking in the long run to see about governance in the way in which we are dealing with anything that we're doing, whether it's security or healthcare. We need to look into capacity building and into having a different way of speaking. Because otherwise, in the future, it will be still the same dynamic. The dynamic needs to change.
Asita, thank you for now very much indeed. Let's bring in Michael Bloss, who's waiting for us. Michael's a Green. Asita is a Conservative. I'm thinking, though, you might be in some way in agreement with a number of the things that Asita's been saying, Michael. Could you tell us?
Absolutely. I agree on a number of things with her. Especially with the question of how to have a global approach that is not patronizing. I mean, we all know, even if we get 100% of vaccination in Europe, it will not help us if the rest of the world still has no vaccination, because then there will be another mutation. But what has happened actually is that the US, Joe Biden, has asked for a WTO waiver for the patents of the vaccination, so that everyone would be able to produce it themselves. And the EU actually was against this, and therefore it did not happen. So the best way in order to make everyone on the globe having a vaccination is to enable them to produce it themselves by a WTO waiver. And unfortunately, here Europe's position is the position that stops it. And I think here she should have done, or we could have done better, and we should be partners with the US in this regard.
Michael, it's one of these problems, isn't it, that when this thing is invented, and it's great ingenuity that creates this vaccine, people want to make money out of it. That's the problem, isn't it? And that's where the kind of political and moral dilemma comes in. And clearly you're on the side of it that says this thing should be made available to everybody.
I don't think it's a moral dilemma. I mean, we are in a big pandemic that has huge costs to the whole society, that has huge costs to the economy. So it's also economical to end this pandemic as fast as possible. We have been giving a lot of money for research on this vaccination. So actually they have been developed with public money. So now, providing them publicly to other countries, having a WTO waiver would be beneficial to the whole globe, because we would be ending the pandemic much sooner. So I don't think this is just a moral attitude. It would be also just an overall smarter attitude. And I really do not understand why Europe in this regard is actually blocking it.
I'm sensing nodding all around the panel here. Thank you very much, Michael. There are many issues in this, so I'm going to move you on to a different aspect of what Ursula von der Leyen was talking about today. Let's take another little segment of the European Commission President's speech.
On the topic of Afghanistan, you said that an extra 100 million euros of humanitarian aid will be provided to people there. You also talked about helping refugees who fled to neighboring countries. Is there still talk of welcoming Afghan refugees into Europe? Is the new pact on migration and asylum, which you've encouraged member countries to sign, still a priority to you, or is such talk taboo?
If we look at Afghanistan, so first of all, it is of utmost importance to help people in Afghanistan who are internally displaced people and who need immediately humanitarian aid. It's the basics. They need food, they need access to clean water. So here we are increasing our humanitarian aid, and it is very good to work together with the United Nations. Then there are millions of Afghans in the neighboring countries. And therefore it is important to support those neighboring countries that host them, and to give support to the Afghan people in the neighboring countries of Afghanistan. Of course, we do everything possible to help those who worked with us to bring them to safety. And indeed, in the very end, if we look at the very large picture, There is a proposal on the table, and that is the Pact for Migration and Asylum. Everything we need to manage migration in a humane and effective way is in there. And therefore, my call is on the Parliament, but also on the Member States, to progress with that file.
First, my error, that wasn't from the speech. That was a little mini-exclusive snaffled by our Europe editor, Caroline de Cameray, with Ursula von der Leyen. Well done to you, Caroline. The message there, Yves Bertoncini, about immigration, migration. The EU, first time round with all the migrants coming from Syria, really was bitten badly in many ways. It backfired. I'm thinking of Merkel opening Germany to let people in, people rowing about where the migrants go. Call for a different response this time. Emmanuel Macron saying quite early on that there should be a way of actually sort of assessing this. And he got a lot of criticism for that. But isn't this the same kind of thing that Ursula von der Leyen is suggesting?
Oh, yes, indeed. In the kind of same context, meaning that Europe is divided because every time we see asylum seekers coming, some of us see them as victims and some others see them as threats. So the divide, maybe you could call it a West-East divide, but not only, is still there. I mean, the main challenge from the Afghanistan crisis is a more global one, geopolitical, military, and she also delivered on this a bit later on. But to stay on this humanitarian aspect and migration flows, the first thing she could say is that there's no such massive inflows of migrants coming from Afghanistan. In the past there was, but not now. So this is the first thing to be said. And then on this basis, yes, of course, she said, we have proposals to secure the control at the external border checks, to welcome people who would like to come, to help Afghanistan and the surrounding countries financially so that they could take care of the migrants, because the migrants actually, they don't want to come to Europe. The overwhelming majority of them, as in any crisis, would like to stay around the country to be safe there, to be protected, to be helped, so that they could come back a bit later on. So the main message from me is it's not a threat. It's yes, there is something to be done, and Europe has tools, provided the European Parliament, but even more importantly, the member states can try and build a compromise on the basis of the Commission's proposal. The problem, final word, is that they probably won't make it, because for many politicians, including in Central Europe, migration is not only a problem, it's a solution, it's a political resource they play with. So that's make Mrs. von der Leyen, the Commission's task, even more difficult and challenging.
Indeed, it is one of the sort of hot-button political topics, isn't it, in every country, that of migration and immigration. Let's bring in our two MEPs, Asita Kanko from the European Conservatives and Reformists, and Michael Bloss from the Greens. Starting with you, Asita. In terms of migration, I'm from the UK. The Home Secretary there, Priti Patel, is talking about pushing back, literally pushing back rubber dinghies as they arrive over the English Channel with migrants in them. I don't think anybody sees that as a civilised way to deal with the issues. What do you think about how Europe should be tackling the problem as it comes over the horizon of migrants coming out of Afghanistan?
Yes, I think here, this is a big question, but I would like to reply in 3 points. First of all, I think that what is happening in Afghanistan is a consequence of a big failure in international politics, and it is also the consequence of radical Islam. So what I would like to call for, what the debate here today as well, yesterday, is that the EU should be ready to fight radical Islam, not only abroad when it's comfortable to sit safely in the hemicycle here and say so, but also here in European soil, because the way in which women are being treated in Afghanistan today, with a curtain dividing them and separating them from men in the schools and forcing them to leave classrooms before the lesson is done, is totally unacceptable and a huge discrimination. And we do experience such things in some neighborhoods, so we need to have proper integration. Second, I regret the naivety of the European Union. When President Biden came to Europe, most of the things that are happening now could have been anticipated, and they were not. So I think they have underestimated President Biden as an American president just because they have met Trump. But it does not give us an excuse. He is defending American interests, and we should defend the EU, and we should have an alliance with him to face the rest of the world. And we are not being a geopolitical commission that was promised to us. And third, about migration, it is a big, big failure. I think this is the most unfulfilled promise that the EU made to the European citizen. And today in her speech, President von der Leyen recognized that there is a very, very slow and painful progress for the files that they have presented. And this is very sad, actually, that we are in this situation. And I think it's good that she admitted it. But very good proposals are on the table since last year. And as a shadow rapporteur myself of one of these files, the asylum procedure, I've noticed zero progress. So I think what the EU should do about migration is first start working on it. And we have done so with the Blue Card Directive that has been voted today, and we're waiting for the results. And I was one of the shadows on that, and I'm very glad that it's going to be adopted, that the EU will have also its fair share in the race for talents instead of losing them to others. So we need to combine legal migration, successfully legal migration, attract talents, and also tackle human smugglers and have proper return policy, and also have the member states work for successful integration. When people are not getting included where they go to, then they contribute also to create prejudice about what a migrant is. But it's possible actually to become part of the community, and there is added value brought by migrants also in our countries. So the EU right now is not advancing on this topic. And regularly people are dying in the sea because there is no policy. And I'm super frustrated when I see what is happening. We need to start working file by file, step by step, but achieving results one after the other.
Asita, thank you very much indeed. We'll bring in our other guests to comment on this in part 2 of the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Welcome back to the France 24 debate, our hand-picked panels dissecting the challenges ahead for Europe in the light of the State of the Bloc speech by the European Commission President in Strasbourg, Ursula von der Leyen. Taking Europe to the next level is what we're discussing. Let's introduce you to our panel. Here in the studio, Yves Bertoncini, consultant on European affairs and President of the European Movement here in France. Great to see you. On the other side of our studio, our special surprise guest, Adina Rivol, who's spokesperson for the European Commission in France. Thank you very much for joining us here for part 2.
Thank you for the invitation.
Joining us from afar, though very welcome in this debate, of course, Asita Kanko, MEP of the European Conservatives and Reformists. Asita, great to see you. And from the Green Party, Michael Bloss, MEP. Michael, you didn't get a chance to talk about our last topic there, immigration. Can I give you the first comment here in part 2 about the issue of immigration? What are your feelings from the Green perspective?
I mean, I think we really have to make a distinction what we're talking about. In the case of Afghanistan, we currently talk about asylum procedures. So we're talking about people who have to flee their country because of political reasons, because of religious reasons, because of gender reasons. And here, I think the European Union as a whole, but actually a lot of member states, they are not doing it well. They are actually quite shameful in their policies. The Netherlands only wanted to take 3 people back home that worked for their embassy. So all of the people that worked, for instance, for German embassy, for the European Union, for NATO, and are now under threat, we have to help them because they were helping us. But many act as if it would be now their own problem. So this shines a very bad light on the European Union as such, on their global reputation. And this is, I think, what we should be talking about, how to get the people that are now currently under threat out of Afghanistan so they're not going to be, for instance, killed by the Taliban.
I can't see anybody disagreeing with what you're saying, Michael. Thank you very much indeed. Let's change the topic and move on to another issue that Ursula von der Leyen was talking about, the defence of the 27-state bloc. Of course, it's a big issue. And of course, there's lots of agreement and disagreement on this one. Let's bring in our special guest, Adina Rivol, who's spokesperson for the European Commission here in France. Thank you for joining us. Great to see you. We've been discussing a number of issues. COVID, we've been discussing immigration, we're moving on to defence, but obviously these things overlap, so don't be afraid to sort of bring other issues in as you feel you have to. In terms of what Ursula von der Leyen was saying today on the issue of defence, what's your reaction?
Well, overall, what I saw in the Ursula von der Leyen speech is that EU delivered. In fact, EU delivered on vaccination, EU delivered on recovery, and we delivered also on the Green Deal. And we delivered as a team, Team Europe. And she spoke a lot today about the soul of Europe, and the soul of Europe, which is solidarity in the crisis. So now we are also faced with another crisis, different crisis, of course, migration crisis, Afghan crisis, and also, of course, another problematic link with it. But Ursula von der Leyen made important announcements, for instance, in terms of dealing with what's happening in Afghanistan. She announced an increase of humanitarian aid from the European Union, 100 additional millions, in order to deal with those Afghan people who need our help. She said, we stand with the Afghan people. So this is a clear sign of solidarity.
And that is something that I think, Eve, you were talking about, the idea of giving the money to help people stay near to where they are, with the dream, I suppose, of returning to their homes at some point.
Yes, it has to be said and said again. You know, people, they don't want to flee their homes by pleasure. They don't want to jump into a plane to go far from their home and then invading France and Europe. That's not their plan. So since it's not their plan, we need to help them staying there in Afghanistan, around Afghanistan. But I believe, if we talk about the next level, what Mrs. von der Leyen, apart from the precise local situation, what she has said, which is very important, and it's typically the next level, it's, yes, the consequences, the lessons to be drawn in terms of Europeans' ability to shape their neighborhood, to shape, to play a role in this kind of crisis. Because what we have seen is that when the US decided to leave, so we could not have replaced them. So she said, well, we have to be more assertive in terms of European defense, European influence in the world, within the NATO, within the transatlantic alliance, and this is key, and she was right to start by this. It's not an alternative, it's just we need to reinforce our ability to act within this alliance when the Americans are not there or reluctant or they are leaving. And then she made some very concrete proposals. I would say that she did not deliver yet on this. She delivered a speech. It's easier said than done, but at least the diagnosis is a good one.
And we have made a lot of progress because in defense, we have already a European Defense Fund, which is a big progress. And we have even a Director General for Defense at the European Commission under the responsibility of Thierry Breton. And we are delivering also from a philosophical perspective and from a European perspective, also in other areas such as cyber attacks, because Ursula von der Leyen announced today, in fact, a European policy for cyber attacks, because this will be also the next level, the next step. We will be confronted with multiple challenges, hybrid crisis in the future, and we have elections also in Europe, so we need to take care of that also.
Indeed, the old-fashioned threat probably from boots on the ground, but the new threat, of course, it's up in the cloud, isn't it? That's exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Let's bring in one of our MPs, Michael Bloss from the Greens. Michael, the Greens and defence, excuse my ignorance, I don't see the two going together, but clearly the Greens have a viewpoint on what this is about. What are your thoughts on the role of the EU alongside NATO, the role of defence? What would you say?
But first of all, I want to say, we can discuss about defence. There is good ideas. For instance, we could have an internal market for defense. Currently, we are having, building 24 different kinds of tanks in Europe. In the US, it's only 4. So if we would actually do it together, we can save a lot of money and have the same power. But I think what Ursula von der Leyen now proposed was to have a VIT exemption for buying weapons in Europe. I think this is really the wrong way. We should be going more into the internal market thing. But let me tell you say one thing. This is the state of the European Union. And Ursula von der Leyen spoke around 5 minutes on climate and what has happened in the summer. And I think that was completely missing the point in what state the European Union is right now. We had floods. We had lots of people dying from climate catastrophes. We had forest fires all over Europe. We have the IPCC, the International Climate Scientists Panel, telling us in 2030 already 1.5 degree temperature goal could be raised. And it was like only 5 minutes on this absolutely central topic. I was a bit disappointed with this, because the state of the European Union, if we talk about what state is it in right now, it is actually dealing a lot already with the climate catastrophe, and that was too little from von der Leyen in this regard.
Michael, you've eased us towards that very topic, moving from defence to climate. Let's take a listen to that segment from Ursula von der Leyen talking about climate.
My message today is that Europe is ready to do more. We will now propose an additional €4 billion for climate finance until 2027. But we expect the United States and our partners to step up too. This is vital, because closing the climate finance gap together, the US and the European Union, would be such a strong signal for global climate leadership. And it is time to deliver now. We have no time to wait anymore.
Let's go straight to Asita Kanko for a reaction to that. Asita, I was trying to get to you to talk about defence. You can have a little comment on that too. But we're moving on to climate now and what Europe is doing in order to, well, basically to save the planet.
Yeah, I've missed part of what you said. I think the connection was gone for a couple of seconds. Just to react quickly about climate, I think it's very important, of course, to continue this. As a mother of a teenager, I hear a lot about climate at home, and I think we need to listen to our children and see how we can build a better planet for them. And it does involve a lot of investment. But when I look at what we're doing today in various member states, is like, for example, trying to step out of, to close down nuclear plants and build gas plants which are producing more carbon. And we need to look at to be consistent. If we want less pollution, we need to invest in cleaner energy. And I don't think that the choice that we're making today are sustainable. And we also need to have a global perspective on this, and companies are busy with the sustainable development goals. So it's important that this has been stressed, but the way in which we're implementing it needs some more conversation. On defense, I was thinking when we're speaking about that, it's a very beautiful dream. And I like the idea, but I don't believe in it. Why? Just one example, Europe can't even get together about something as simple as migration policy. So how are we supposed to go and get together about an army and a common physical defense? I don't see how this is going to happen. So perhaps it's better to invest more in NATO and to use the weapon that Europe has always been very strong about, our diplomacy. We have always been very strong about that. We need to reinforce that and position ourselves on the international scene and avoid making agreements with strange countries. Like now, I'm hearing that a deal is in the making with Iran to welcome Afghan refugees. And first of all, I don't think anyone should send a woman or a girl who is fleeing the Taliban to the Ayatollahs. This is unacceptable. And second, do we really want to be depending on Iran just like we're depending on Turkey right now? How smart is that geopolitically?
Asita, thank you. Yves?
Well, I believe she proposed interesting things while using not the correct term. We see the reaction, negative reaction. The correct term is European collective security. You know, collective security. Collective security is not only about defense. You know, against terrorists, you don't think nuclear weapons. It's not only about army. It can be also about police and justice cooperations, intelligence sharing, development aid, stabilization of our neighborhood. She said this, by the way, but she chose to talk about defense only. And I think, I mean, on this aspect, I agree that it's very sensitive. You know, defense in Europe, it's either national or transatlantic. So it's very difficult as a next level to Europeanize defense. But it's not about that only. It's about collective security at large with different strengths. And for some of these strengths, Europe can already deliver, for example, in terms of development aid or humanitarian aid.
I was thinking about the trial going on in Paris now of the terror cell that attacked Paris in November 2015. I mean, clearly there were failings, inter-European failings.
And we have learned, hopefully, we have built on this lesson. There is more, for example, bilateral Franco-Belgian cooperation. And then this is the way forward. Time has come to deliver on the Treaty of Maastricht promises 30 years ago. Promises on, yes, European defense community policy, common foreign policy, and also justice and police cooperation. At that time, there was no such threats. So not that, not pressures. Today, we have to deliver because the world has become more dangerous, including in our neighborhood. And Uncle Sam is not always there for us, and that's life. So we need to grow, and that is really the next challenge, next level. Well, at least she draws some lessons from the symbolic Afghanistan crisis. But of course, it's not only about her. It's not only about the Commission, even if, yes, in the Commission there have been progress, a new DG. But as she said, it's about member states, but also European Parliament. So it will be a long way, but I think she paved the way. She opened interesting perspectives. And by the way, there will be the need for even more than one mandate to deliver on such a revolutionary perspective.
Indeed. Adina, you want to talk about climate, but take it wherever you wish. Go ahead.
Yes, on defense, it's precisely what the European Commission President presented today. In fact, increased cooperation between intelligence services, because this is something which is highly important. And on climate, the European Union is the world leader in the fight against climate change. We are the only one in the world to have a climate law, a binding climate law. We have an engagement to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And now we proposed on the 14th of July the path toward 2030. So now the Council and the Parliament are discussing on the Commission proposal on smarter cars, cleaner planes, on moderating energy demand, and also on other measures related to cleaner transport. So all this basically is on the table. And very concretely, on the recovery plan, on the massive recovery plan, in Europe today, the European Union is investing around 800 billion euro in order to renovate buildings. It's a huge renovation wave for Europe, 5 billion only for France, which means that around European citizens, and we have 30 million in Europe, which are energy poor. And this is a huge number. So we need to deal with this, and we are dealing with this renovation wave. And this is very concrete. It's good for the planet, it's good for the local economy, and it's good for the citizens.
So I might get help to insulate my house to save using
Yes,
too much
you
power.
can.
Will I get help to get rid of my diesel car and get an electric one?
Yes.
I don't know.
You can have my Prime Rénov', for instance, which is
okay, thank you.
which is financed by the European Union in the framework of the recovery plan.
There are gestures that are helps towards that. As you were talking, Mikhail Bloss was shaking his head and raising an eyebrow. So, Mikhail, over to you. What do you think?
Well, it was just said that the European Union is a global leader, and I appreciate and I think it's good that we are now thinking about plans to decarbonize. That's really a good start. But today also the numbers came out. Where are we globally? And the Paris Agreement says we should stay well below 2 degrees and actually get to 1.5 degree. And globally, we are currently heading more towards 3 degrees. And the European Union was assessed, and it says, with what we are trying, we are also above 2 degrees. So that means we are not even fulfilling the Paris Agreement. And what I'm saying is everything that the Commission proposed is good, but it has to be delivered much faster. The Commission says, for instance, that there should be tax break for kerosene for air flights until the year 2032, so 11 more years. And I don't understand it. We can get rid of it directly. For instance, I appreciate the renovation wave. We should be doing it. Why don't you put also solar rooftops on all of the 35 million buildings? Because that would reduce CO2 emissions of Europe of around 5%. So there's a lot of things more that can be done. And unfortunately, the climate crisis is the crisis where you have to act really fast, because if you do good things after the year 2030, it will not help you. So there a lot of things has to be speeded up. And I wanted Ursula von der Leyen, especially after this summer, to talk about how she wants to speed up these proposals. And unfortunately, I didn't hear that.
What
Adina,
I wanted to add
solar
is that,
panels on the rooftops.
is that Europe cannot act alone. And President von der Leyen underlined it today that we need major engagement from China and for other partners in the fight against global change.
Yes, I totally agree, but she didn't dare mentioning the carbon adjustment mechanism, the border. She should have delivered on this by July, by the way, last July, because simply it's politically sensitive, not only in Europe, but with our partners. So I'm not saying she has no good reason to be very cautious on this, but it's just a way to stress the difference between a roadmap, a vision, which in my view is good, and of course the measures which are not already there, because the Commission in general, has to try to find a good balance within the European Parliament. We have 2 MEPs tonight, but also with the member states, and it's even more difficult. But I hope that the geopolitical context, the world is changing without us sometimes, will be an incentive to show that we're stronger together, even if we're united in diversity.
Fantastic. We're running out of time. Oh, so
just to finish,
quickly?
the carbon adjustment mechanism is in our proposals made on 14th of July. And she mentioned today that there will be new European resources today in order to reimburse the common debt.
You can't take the train if the train's not running. Public transport often doesn't fill the gaps and means people have to use their cars. That's all I'll say. Sita, can I bring you in, please, for what's probably going to be a final comment? Your thoughts. You say you've got a teenager at home telling you about the climate. Yeah. What's the solution? Does it lay in our hands, or does it lay in the hands of Europe? Does it lay in the hands of the world leaders? What's the most important thing, do you think?
I think the most important thing is to do something that is practically achievable and to actually have results, because now we're just having very beautiful philosophy, and I like what was said here about the fact that the world is changing without us. This is absolutely true, and we are actually believing that we are a global leader on all kinds of things. And it made me think of what Thatcher once said, that when you have power, you don't need to say that you have it. It's like being a lady, you just, when we need now to say that we are global leaders, nobody else is saying that about us. So it's saying a lot of things and referring to the way in which we should listen to the youth and see how we can respond to what they wish. I will give you an example. I was trying to buy a new car, and I took my daughter with me, and she has so much influence that the car seller sent me a mail yesterday saying, I have adapted my offer to the wishes of your daughter about climate. And I've noticed that increasingly I have to take into account what children want about climate. So they have so much power. So this is just to say that we used to have research showing that women were deciding a lot about what families were purchasing. I would say to businesses, be careful. Children are today deciding a lot. And it's not only my kid, but plenty of kids around the planet. So we need to take their wishes into account and also try to see them as a customer base that will increasingly be consuming on a very responsible way.
Sita, thank you very much indeed. Sita Kanko, MEP, European Conservatives and Reformist Group. One line, go on quickly.
Indeed, I want to join Sita in saying that President von der Leyen put the emphasis today on young people and on young people consciousness about climate change.
Adina Revol, spokesperson of the European Commission in France. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to Michael Bloss there from the Greens as well for joining us. And thanks, of course, to Yves Bertoncini, European Affairs Consultant and President of the European Movement, for being with us. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks to you for watching. Stay with us here on France 24.